Hi, Steve Hayes here, and welcome to Days of Getting Better, episode 41. Today I'm going to talk a bit about why the world of mental health is changing and where I think it's going. I'm going to talk about how we might use the data on psychological flexibility and ACT for chronic pain to see a bit about where it's going and to do a little shout out for the person who's probably the most important of several in fostering that change, Lance McCracken, and a cool seminar that I have coming up here in a couple of weeks. Uh, Having a conversation with Lance. I got to talk just a little bit about ACT boot camp for behavior analysts and what is going on in the world of behavior analysis that makes this especially important, and maybe a couple other things. And so let's get to it. The world of mental health is changing dramatically. And if you're in that area and interested in that area, you can sense that there's a readjustment, a fundamental readjustment in how we even think about the field, what we expect from the science, and how we want it to be expressed in the community, in the life of people around the planet. I think the things that are driving it are a small set. You can count them on your two hands. It begins with the failure of the system that has been in place now and the increasing awareness that that system has always been based on motives and ideas that are, frankly, unworthy of us as a human civilization. The whole idea of thinking of mental suffering, of human suffering, as being a mental disease, a hidden disease, uh, is somewhere between implausible and laughable at this point, having spent so many billions of dollars in the pursuit of that, and not a single disease having been identified. Furthermore, the progress of being able to produce greater human prosperity and to alleviate the burden of mental struggles has not occurred. If anything, it's gotten worse. Some of that may be it's gotten worse because the demand is much greater. But some of it, I think, is that the model itself never was right, isn't right, and never going to be made right. It's based on statistical assumptions that can't be met and on a set of guesses about scientific outcomes that have turned out to be wrong over and over and over again, to the point now where people are looking, and they should be, for alternatives. There's been a shift towards processes of change as a focus, and that is occurring in many, many different areas. You can see it in the uptick in studies of mediation, moderated mediation, things of that kind, and traditional randomized controlled trials. But you can see it even more clearly, I think, in the greater interest in transdiagnostic processes, so-called, still with one foot in the traditional diagnosis, that's why it's called that. And now the step forward even into whether or not we need traditional diagnosis at all, given that its primary utility now is in just having a nomenclature, and it comes at the great cost of opening up persons to interventions that have long-term side effects and great costs to us as a society, namely the over-medicalization of human beings that have reached proportions that are really starting to get silly. Silly is probably not the exact word when you're able to have measurable amounts of psychoactive medications in fish caught in the open ocean. There's a greater interest in resilience. And part of that is because there's also a feature of overload of the current system. I think the COVID crisis, the pandemic, has landed now, and it's kind of reducing into passing into the rearview mirror. It's a little incredible, isn't it, to remember how many months we may have spent inside and not seeing our friends or being able to touch others and all this kind of thing that we went through. And while it's in the rearview mirror, there's an echo now, and it's going to echo for generations. But one of the major echoes, I believe, is this awareness that it's not 1 out of 5 people, it's 5 out of 5 people who need to work on their mental resilience. That's always been true. It's not new. The thing that's different is instead of our wisdom traditions or art and literature pushing forward greater awareness that part of our life task is learning how to be a whole human being. And now we see in the lives of people that we love and the impact of COVID, what happened, that it is not 1 out of 5, it's 5 out of 5. We're beginning to transition into, it's not just 1 hour a week, that's 1 out of 168 if you're seeing a therapist, for example. No, it's 24/7. It literally is relevant even when you're sleeping or not sleeping because of what's there. It's relevant in your physical exercise. It's relevant in the food that you eat. It's relevant in the conversations that you have. It's relevant when you get up out of bed in the morning and when you go to bed at night. What's relevant? Learning how to be a more resilient human being and to take advantage of the great opportunity that we have now, which I'll get to in just a minute. I think another thing that's undermining what has been there is the positive psychology movement. There are places where I part company with the positive psychology movement, but the core idea that we need to not just think of the painful difficulties that people face and have and the weaknesses or things they need to work on. We need to focus also on strengths and on positive goals. I think has been assimilated. It's in the culture now. People expect it. And you see it with podcasts on high performers or in the many, many ways that internet influencers are not simply trying to deal with what's wrong in life, but what some of the real positive aspirations might be in life and how to achieve them. I mentioned the overload issue, and that's basically the fact that you can no longer get a session with a caring psychotherapist if you need one in many, many parts of the world. You may not be able to afford it. They may not take insurance. A whole lot of folks are stepping out of that. Years long waiting lists. And I think we're beginning to turn towards other means of getting input into mental and behavioral health. I said mental and behavioral, notice that, because in this expansion that's occurring, people do want help in diet, sleep, exercise. What about alcohol and so on? And people literally are wearing the tools on their wrists to keep track of more and more and more things, some of which using sensors that tell you things about what's going on in your body, but also, if you're willing to do it, how many mindful moments you've had that day, or what your mood has been that day, tracking it, making sense of it. So, along with the overload of the system as it is, there's channels that are opening up into the system that it's going to become. Another thing I think that's really straining, what we're facing right now is the speed of change. Boy, hang on to your hat, because we've gone from a buggy whip era to the driving around in a car era to suddenly you're on a bullet train, and who knows what's next in terms of how fast change is coming. And that's true in our day-to-day life. You see it just in how fast AI is having an impact on employment in area after area. How many new opportunities are opening up that are pretty cool, but require that you be perhaps retrained, that you think about what even your job is in a different way. The ability to work from home and the pushback people have of doing a traditional 9 to 5. One that I've mentioned, and I won't really do a deep dive, but I think it's out kind of at the corner of people's eye. You can see the end of work from here. I've done this a little bit in the podcast, and I'm going to say it again because I'm going to do a deep dive into this. It's coming. It's certainly true in the way that AI is thundering into white-collar spaces. But friends, the humanoid robots are just over the hill. Some of them will be visible probably even to just normal consumers within a couple of years, but in factories, it's already beginning to happen. Of course, the robots that build our cars and so forth, the special things, but I mean humanoid robots. And we're just a few years away from combining the AI developments with a relatively known technology. If you just look at, and I'm not just talking about any one brand or whatever, I'm not just talking about Optimus, but look at what's going on out there in terms of how well the humanoid robots can handle things, catch things, sort things, walk around, move, lift. You don't have to be a genius to think that, oh my goodness, how about building a house? How about repairing a plumbing line? How about taking care of the laundry? How about helping my mother, who is bedridden, in the back bedroom? And how about basically all manual labor? The speed of change is so fast. People think it's linear. It's not linear. It's exponential. We just went through the COVID crisis. Please. I had a family member who was planning a wedding in the Bahamas or the Caribbean. And because I did understand something about the exponential functions of pandemics, when it first started, I sat down and I did the math under a couple of just reasonable assumptions of what happens in pandemics, and told my nephew, cancel the wedding now or you can get your deposit back, because it's not going to happen. And sure enough, the island, just a short while later, if you planned it out linear, it'd say, oh, we're fine, it's only the airport shut down, you couldn't even travel in. Well, in the same way, pick any exponential function you like, friends. You can easily do it inside an Excel spreadsheet. Pick any work area that you care about. And change is happening so fast that the people I'm talking to, the vast majority are going to be not only just alive, but in this same basic era of your life when we begin to see the possibility that work is optional. That could be wonderful, or it could be a train wreck. Depends what we do with it. And we're going to have to learn how to be interested and creative and having fun when we're not scrambling after uh, simply whatever we're doing at work and then spending a couple hours at home. That's ahead, but it's not very far ahead, and it's enough at the edges that it puts a sense of enemy into it, a sense of, oh my goodness, things are changing and changing really fast. So, how are we going to step up to that? Well, I think the way that we're going to step up to it is we're going to work on creating modern minds for this modern world that's coming. And if I could pick just one area where that has been worked out pretty well about part of that future vision, I'd pick chronic pain. Why? Because we've been at it the longest. There's some really cool folks, the Joanne Dahl, Kevin Vols, I had to name one, Lance McCracken, who for 30 years has been pushing a psychological flexibility model, and now even idionomics and some of the things that we're into, if you've been following my work. They're now at the University of Uppsala in Sweden, the oldest university in Sweden. And part of what he has been able to do is to break down the psychological flexibility model and create measures in each and every one of the areas that are as important. He's done that work, and to create targeted interventions that deal with all of those processes. He's done that work as well. And why would you want to know about chronic pain if you don't know about chronic pain? Because it's a model of what's happening, what's going to happen going forward. And I do want to say that there's a wonderful free seminar that's going to happen. And there will be a link along with this to meet with this wonderful man, Lance McCracken, myself, and Gijs Janssen, my partner there in the Netherlands, working with PsychFlex, Mindgrafter, and some of the things I'm into. And we're going to do a free webinar with Lance about how chronic pain creates a model for the future of mental and behavioral health. It's going to be held on April 16th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. You can do the math. It's Pacific Daylight Time, which means it's in the evening. I think if I got the math right, it's about 7 p.m. in Europe. But do check your own clocks and make sure that that's right. And it'll be about an hour and a half or 2 hours. It'll be free. There's a link there. And what about this conversation links? Well, I want to just mention a couple other things, and I'll put them in some of the materials that come along with this. But let me just mention 5 studies that I've seen from Lance, incredible output, just over the last few months. He's had two randomized trials in The Lancet, the highest impact biological and biobehavioral journal in the world, and the oldest, even more than New England Journal or JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, and so forth. One on motor neuron disease and one on fibromyalgia, one with an app and one not. I saw that he just had one land now on Parkinson's disease. And so what he's doing is he's taking what he's learned with chronic pain, and he's part of larger multidisciplinary teams. He's usually not the first author, but I'm tracking how it happened, and I see what's going on in the background, is that people are realizing that you can take this enormous amount of data on psychological flexibility and on ACT, coming up on 1,400 randomized controlled trials and several thousand studies, and some of the best process evidence out there, the way that we've measured it traditionally. You've heard me talk about that in the past. And you can kernelize it, and you can put it together, and you can take some of these orphan diseases, like motor neuron disease. Only 50,000 people in the world, I believe, if I remember it right, have it, but it's a horrible disease. You're going to die. But you're going to die in 3 years. Those are life. And what can we do in those 3 years? Turns out we can do a lot, and with ACT, the quality of life goes up, and people have something that the medical care system can give them when traditional medical care can give them nothing, drawn from ACT. Same is true of fibromyalgia. 2.5 to 5% of the human population, 20-25% of the costs in our healthcare system and traditional medical methods are almost inert and sometimes even harmful, the opiate crisis being a pretty good example of it. Parkinson's, arguably in that same territory. And there's other people who are doing this research now. You're seeing a boom, boom, boom in so-called orphan diseases, showing that psychological flexibility and ACT can be kernelized, made to fit, and put into the lives of people who are dealing with these kinds of challenges. Well, friends, if you can do it there, why can't you do it with diet, sleep, or exercise? Why can't you do it with, well, of course, people are doing that. Well, why can't you do it with relationships or running your business well? People are doing it there too. 2 other studies, these are both just with the last 2 weeks from Lance. One showing that if you take high-density longitudinal data in pain programs, and then you start looking at what the normative stats are telling you and what the within-person stats are telling you, and it's a completely different story. This is the idionomic thing, that we have been tricked, drawn into a top-down normative categorical way of thinking about human beings. That's in our diagnostic system. It's in our FDA. It's in our healthcare system. It's also in our schools. It's in our theories. And so deep that you can hardly even see that it's there. We've been wallowing in it ever since Galton tempted us into this pathway. And a new study just out shows that sure enough, oh my God, huge individual differences, huge violations of what's called ergodicity, the assumptions that would allow you to go from a bell curve to telling what happens to people's lives based on their percentile rank. Turns out you can't do that unless there's no trends and everybody's the same. And when you're dealing with processes of change, of course there's trends, that's why it's called change, and people are different. So unless you're treating frozen clones, you need to wake up. The wake-up moment is people are beginning now hearing these kinds of statements from persons like myself and Joe Sorochi and Bajendra Saja and Stefan Hoffman, Cristobal Hernandez, Clarissa Ong, and a whole team of folks. But not just that. Other people are picking up on it now and looking at it, the Peter Molinars of the world and others, and taking a deep breath in and, oh my goodness, multi-level modeling and all the things that we've been doing to deal with the individuality of how human beings respond even to interventions focused on known processes of change is ginormous. It accounts for 80 to 90 to 95% of the variance. And given that, why are we focusing on means? Why aren't we focusing instead on the trajectories of people? And the answer is we should. A final one I'll mention as to why you should maybe come to this seminar, but also why this change in mental health is irreversible. And mental and behavioral health, or mental, behavioral, and social wellness, it's really all of that, is that Lance is part of a team. One of his, I think it's his doctoral students, published a really nice piece coming out of her dissertation showing, or maybe I've confused the two, maybe that's the idionomic study. Anyway, has produced a study showing that CBT for chronic pain is moderated by psychological inflexibility, and its outcomes, both for pain-related and for more physical health, broader health outcomes, mediated by psychological inflexibility. I've suspected that for a long time. Lance picked up on psychological flexibility from a dissertation that David Geiser did. He wasn't my student, but I was on the committee of looking at ACT and CBT for chronic pain and developing a measure by taking the early measures of what we called the distancing questionnaire that then became the acceptance and action questionnaire long ago in the mid-'80s. And Lance saw that, turned it into the chronic pain and acceptance questionnaire, and that was part of how this whole thing began to change. Well, in those early studies on ACT versus CBT for chronic pain, we could already see, I think it's in David Geiser's dissertation, which I think was done in 1987, 88, something like that, that some of the psychological flexibility measures that we were developing helped understand some of what's happening in traditional CBT, which at the time was really very focused on a traditional, I mean capital letters, kind of change your thoughts to change your life approach. So my message to you is the world of mental, behavioral, and social wellness is changing, and that chronic pain got out of the gate first, and because of people like those I've mentioned, but especially Lance McCracken, has really put his flashlight forward as to what's going to happen, I believe, as we become process-focused, kernelized, more individually focused, and we begin to include prosperity goals as well as problem goals, and we expand our view from simply the diagnostic categories into DSM to all the areas in which people need positive support. I got to do a little bit of thank you to Lance as well. He put in my name for an honorary degree from the University of Uppsala, and I got such a degree, and boy, do they know how to throw a party. Went over there just a couple months ago and was treated just so well, and gave a little workshop and all that, but also, had a laurel put on my head, which I've now had framed, and there's a little seal there from the University of Uppsala, which at the time this was done, since it's all the way back into the 1500s, you'd get your degree and you'd roll it up in a tube, and that seal would, seal the degree, and that would be your diploma. So I have the diploma as well. I'm pretty proud of it. It's all in Latin, I believe, but there it is. That's my honorary degree from the University of Uppsala. So beyond the prideful kind of thing, I did get to visit his lab, meet his family and his kids, and really see, how he's put together a team that is changing the world. It's changing the world of chronic pain, of course, but now with these orphan diseases, and now with the idionomic understanding, which points a flashlight forward. So it's time for us to really internalize that message. Final shout out, ACT Bootcamp for behavior analysts. If you're getting this newsletter before April 5th, you still have time to get early bird registration. There'll be a link there. It's going to be held April 24, 5, 6, 7 in Oakland, California. And the registrations are ticking up, and we're going to be able to do, I think, reasonably well for the Institute for Better Health, the charity that is sponsoring this. So please, if you know anybody, get them there. DJ Moran, myself, Siri Ming, Brianna Cower, 4 days. And it really is kind of boot camp 2.0, because we're leaning in hard on some of these processes of change. And behavior analysis has always done that: reinforcement, stimulus control, processes of change. And now with RFT, and really increasingly being accepted in behavior analysis and people looking for help. I just saw a big randomized trial in Lancet Psychiatry, which is a huge impact, 64 impact factor, not as big as the Lancet, but 10 to 20 times more than any behavioral journal that you've ever wanted to publish in, including things like Journal Consulting and Clinical Psych. I mean, it's a monster journal. And what was it on? Showing that ACT for parents and caregivers of children who are just diagnosed with autism, how it can support those. So these processes have changed, now are inside the practice and the populations that behavior analysts need to treat. So this is, don't be telling me this is a scope of practice issue. I mean, if behavior analysts don't know how to do parent training, then, and especially with children who are on the spectrum, really? No, that's the scope of practice of behavior analysis. But there's a scope of competence. You have to be trained. You can't just go out and say, oh, ACT came from behavior analysis, so that means I can do it. You have to learn how to do it, and that's true of any area. So it's a wonderful opportunity, and we're going to be doing it again. We're back now, putting our boot camps out with some regularity. So if you know anybody who's a behavior analyst who you love and care about, and you know that the ACT work is relevant, you probably do if you're getting this episode 41 of Days Are Getting Better, please let them know, and let them know in time that they can get a big discount. If they slip by it, they can still register, but it'd be a kindness to them to forward that on. So with that, peace, love, and life, my friends.